Baruch Hashem. Have you ever thought about, there's one of the titles of Messiah. He's called the author of our salvation. Have you ever thought about what that means? To be the author of our salvation? What's an author? What's that? Okay, one that writes a book. Yeah. What else? I mean, an author. What do they do? Yeah. They are a creative force in the telling of a story. So let's apply that to us as individuals. If he is the author, and he actually, I think it also says the finisher. How many books have been started? How many stories have begun and never finished? I probably have half a dozen of them somewhere on some computer somewhere that have never been finished. So he's the author and the finisher of our salvation. So what does that look like? What does it mean? He is the author and the finisher of our salvation.
What he's begun, he'll finish.
Okay?
I don't think he's finished yet.
Yep. Yeah, right? So is your story still being told? Is it still being written?
Yes.
Yep. Salvation. What is salvation? What's that?
Drawing near to God.
Okay, drawing near to God. Yeah. Salvation is coming close to God. It is drawing near to Him. It's if He is the light and the life, and to move away from Him is death, darkness, and all the other stuff that just somehow draws us away, right? Because we're in this war between light and darkness. And if He is salvation and life and light, the closer I get to Him, the more illumined I am, the more I can see, the more I'm able to be honest with myself. So He is the beginner of that story that's being told. What is your story? What does it look like at this chapter of your life? Can you look back a year ago, 6 years ago? What was your story like at that time? You see, it's important to be able to look back so we can move forward. Because if we simply are focused upon just the present, it's either good or bad or somewhere in between at any given moment, right? But if we look back, how has He brought you to this chapter of your life? How has He guided you to this very moment? What does your story look like from the past? Because you know what? He has His hand on yours, helping you write your story. He's not going to write it for you. And when we write our story, what does that look like?
Disaster.
Yeah.
Tragedy.
Tragedy. It's a mess. Because we want to write our story how we want it. And sometimes it's okay. And other times it's, wow, dear God, what happened? So when we allow His hand to be upon ours and we write the story, it's a cooperative effort. He's writing it with us. But He has begun it. And He is there at the finish, the ending. Revelation chapter 21, please. Revelation chapter 21. In verse 1, we read this a few weeks back for one of our holy days. Because we were looking forward to something that's to be in the future. He says, "Now I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no more sea. Then I, John, saw the holy city, the New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven, prepared as a bride, adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from heaven saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and He will dwell with them, and they shall be His people. For God Himself will be with them and be their God. And God will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and there shall be no more no more death, no more sorrow, nor crying, and there shall be no more pain, for the former things have passed away. Then He who sat on the throne said, Behold, I make all things new. And He said to me, Write, for these words are faithful and true. And He said to me, It is done, for I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, and I give of the fountain of water of life freely to all who thirst. He who overcomes shall inherit all things, and I will be his God, and he shall be my son or my daughter. So this is Messiah saying that in the future there is going to be a recreation, a recreation, a recycling, a reforming, a changing, a transformation. He says to every single soul who comes to him, I'm making all things new in you. Baruch Hashem. Are you finished yet? Have you achieved the transcendent level of perfection? Gosh, I want to talk to you afterwards because I sure haven't. He's making all things new in us. We're still in process. The story is still being written. We're changing or not. We're becoming something, whether it's lighter and more illumined by God, or darker and more like this world. What are some qualities of this world that we could kind of like put our finger on? Selfishness. What else? Lust for power. Greed. Pride. You see, all those things are absolutely true. But those are some easy things to see out in the world, right? But when we turn that upon ourselves and we look into the mirror of our hearts, what do we see? Well, we don't have pride, do we? Oh, and there's no lust for power or control, really? I mean, not in us. That's out there, right? What are the things that we look at in ourselves and we say, that's of the world? Anger? What else? Okay, lack of patience. Oh, not us. I mean, only at certain times, like on the road, right? But every other time we're... What else? What are some other things that are of the world?
The tongue.
Okay, specify.
Unkind words, angry words, hurtful words,
Okay.
unforgiving words.
Mm-hmm. Unforgiveness is something that's of the world. The world wants to say, you owe me because you hurt me. You did this or you did that. You owe me. But are we people that are those that are free to forgive as we wish to be forgiven? Or do we hold things within us tightly because that person owes me, that institution, that whatever? Or are we those that follow the words of Messiah? Painful as it is, when he gave the list of things that we should do, did he give us a list of nice things? Going out for ice cream, 3-week vacations. Was that, did you find that in the scriptures? Or did he say, if someone strikes you on the cheek? But he said, if somebody says, carry this for me for a mile, and our first response would be what?
Yeah, right.
If we were feeling kind. No, so those things evoke in us the brokenness that is still found within us. We're being changed into the likeness of Messiah. We say he's the humble king, and it's absolutely true. Is he a king who crawls around in rags and says, oh, please forgive me? Is that the humility of the king? No, the humility of the king is that he is free with his forgiveness. And when we come to him, he forgives us as we ask honestly from the heart. He is gracious and quick to forgive us. What's another aspect of his humility? It's one of the most primary and most awesome things that shows his humility.
Gentleness.
Yeah, he is gentle, yes.
The fact that he became flesh.
The fact that he became a human being like you and me is his humility. He is God, and he stepped down to become and unite with his creation so that he could raise us up to be the children of the Most High God. Humility in God is that he condescended to become a human being, literally descending to become. And then he walked a very humble path. He washed the feet. He healed people that would later hate him and spit on him. And he did it with no expectation. He did it because it's his nature, who he is. Ephesians chapter 4. Behold, I make all things new, he says. Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 17. This I say, therefore, and testify in the Lord, that you should no longer walk as the rest of the Gentiles as they walk, in the futility of their minds, having their understanding darkened, being alienated from the life of God, because of the ignorance that is in them, because of the blindness of their heart, who, being past feeling, have given themselves over to lewdness, to work all uncleanliness with greediness. But you are not so. But you have not learned so. But you have not so learned Messiah. If indeed you have heard him and have been taught by him, as the truth is in Messiah, that you should put off concerning your former conduct the old man or woman, which grows corrupt according to the deceitful lusts, and be renewed in the spirit of your mind. That you should put on the new man, which was created according to God, in true righteousness and holiness. And therefore, putting away lying, let every one of you speak truth with his neighbor, for we are members of one another. Be angry and do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your wrath, nor give place to the devil. So what is the apostle saying? He says, you were once like this, but now you are what?
Changed because of what you've heard and what
Okay.
you've received.
Okay, changed. Okay, a new creation. It's a new creation in process. We're moving on a journey. Well, salvation is this journey, this walk of our lives. It's a walking out of this path. How are you different today than you were a year ago? We just brought in the new year on Rosh Hashanah. We don't necessarily reckon the year by the civil calendar. I know that New Year's Eve is coming up here in a few months according to the civil calendar. But we just celebrated our 13th Rosh Hashanah together as a community. And some of you have been here for almost that entire time. Some of you are newer to us, and we have many people that view us on the internet. Some who have viewed us for almost a year that we've been sending the messages via video, and we've been putting our audio messages out for our entire existence. So for you that have begun or have been viewing us or listening to us, how have you changed in the past year? Can you point to anything and say, yeah, I can see this growth in myself? Can you see that in you? It's because only you and God know. I don't necessarily know. But how are you different? If you say, yes, Baruch Hashem, I can see a little growth in this area, and I made some strides, some big strides in this particular area, but I'm still struggling here, Baruch Hashem. If you say, I can't think of anything that I've grown in, then he's saying to you and to me, start today. Because if we're not growing, then there's something that's not happening within us. It's with great trepidation that we continue in this journey, that we walk this life. You and I don't know that we'll not walk out of this door today and not make it home. That's not depressing, that's just simple reality. How are you different than you were? How am I different than I was yesterday? And so he's calling us to be those that are of a sober mind. What's the opposite of sober? Okay, drunken, disoriented. So to be of a sober mind means what? Clear, that's right. Clear-headed, clear-hearted. Yeah, we're still in process. And we all have the big rocks in us. But are we chipping away at the rocks? but you don't know my rock. It's a boulder. How do you eat an elephant? As if that was delicious, but how do you eat an elephant?
One bite at a time.
One bite at a time. You begin to break the rock down piece by piece, chipping away. And by his mercy and his grace, that rock, that boulder that seems so big, becomes a pile of rubble that is to be swept away. Clearing that space so that crops can be grown, good things can be grown in that space, whatever that is for you or for me. He's saying that we're becoming something different, something new. Philippians chapter 1. Philippians chapter 1. What's the most common thing that we as human beings do whenever we're challenged to be introspective? Look inside to be honest. What's one of the most common things that we as human beings do? Yeah, I'm going to get around to that. Oh, look, a news feed. Let's see. Change. Yeah, change. I've been meaning to get around to that. Oh, look, something's on Twitter. We're so easily distracted. We're so quick to move away from the work, the life, the process that truly leads to happiness.
I think we're almost getting up more quick to say it's not as bad as that guy. Or that lady's, she's dealing with this a lot worse than I am. We compare ourselves with ourselves.
And when we compare ourselves with others, what does that do? What does it not do, and then what does it reinforce?
Well, it's lack of humility because you're looking at somebody else saying you're worse than I am, and you're really lying to yourself.
Yeah.
Trying to divert
Yeah.
from somebody else.
Okay. Avoiding dealing with it, deflecting.
It reinforces that we don't need to change.
That's right. Reinforces, it builds, it solidifies our pride, which is like resin. Resin that becomes hard. What do you have to do in order to deal with resin? How do you make it? What's that? Heat it up. So if we have anger and bitterness and all the things within us and a resin of pride forms around that, what does God have to do in order to
Burn it.
He has to melt that pride.
He has to put us through the furnace of affliction so that we can be healed of these things. It's not because he's angry with us. It's because he loves us. Because he desires his children to be building and becoming like him. Ephesians chapter 1 and verse 1. Verse 3 rather. Did I say Ephesians? I meant Philippians. I think hopefully we're all there. Ephesians chapter 1 and verse 3.
Ephesians or Philippians?
Did I say Ephesians again? Yes. I must have Ephesians on the mind here or something. But I really honestly mean Philippians. Is that where everybody is? Baruch Hashem. So Ephesians, nope, just kidding. Philippians chapter 1 and verse 3. I thank my God upon every remembrance of you, always in every prayer of mine, making requests for you with all joy, for your fellowship in the gospel from the first day until now, being confident of this very thing, that he who has begun a good work in you will complete it until the day of Messiah Yeshua. And just as it is right for me to think this of you all, because I have you in my heart, inasmuch as both in my change and in defense of the confirmation of the gospel, you are partakers with me of grace. For God is my witness how greatly I long for you with the affection of Messiah Yeshua. And on this I pray, that your love may abound more and more in the knowledge and in all discernment, that you may approve the things that are excellent, that you may be sincere and without offense until the day of Messiah, being filled with the fruits of righteousness which are by Messiah Yeshua, to the glory and the praise of God. So he's saying that God's begun something in us. How many people did the apostle touch their lives with, whether it was through his letters or through his person? He engaged them in conversation. How many do you think turned away after having been perhaps under his teaching for a period of time, how many do you think turned away from him? How many do you think, because the words that he says towards the Philippians, he was complimenting them. He was telling them, he was encouraging them. He was telling them, this is good, that you're in my heart. When he speaks like this, he's speaking as a father towards his spiritual children. He desires the best for them. He encourages them, spurring them on towards what? Failure? No, towards true success in life, which comes from walking this path perfectly. Do we walk this path perfectly? Or do we trip and fall sometimes? It's not how it happens in the middle. It's how you finish the race. If you crawl past the finish line, Baruch Hashem, you finished the race. And if you bound over the finish line, do you remember that feeling of being able to bound? I can't imagine bounding now. I'd probably break something. But I remember the exhilaration of bounding. I'm looking forward to bounding again at some point, probably on the other side of the veil. However you finish, it's finishing as best, as well as you can, striving for the prize. Why do you think the apostle and others use the analogy of a race? Why isn't it a scavenger hunt? Why is it a race?
Because a race has a beginning and an end, and you train for it.
Okay, there's training for the race. What's that?
Races were popular during that time.
Okay, races certainly were popular. When you run a race, is there time for a snack? When you're running the race, did you run it and say, "Ooh, it's time for tea. Let me step aside for a moment"? Well, maybe if you're from the UK, perhaps. But when you run the race, there's an urgency, is there not? Do you think that you're going to run the race going, "Yeah, I'll probably finish"? Ooh, I'm feeling kind of tired now. I should maybe sit down for a moment. Is that how people run the race? Not very long. Yep. Did you ever run a race in the natural, hurt yourself in the middle, but struggle to push to the end? Our spiritual journey is like that. We're wounded. We have pains and strains and other things that we have to push past and move through to finish the race. How will that look like? What will be the words of the one who speaks to us? Will he say, "Well done? I walked with you. I ran with you," he might say. "I carried you, I dragged you sometimes, but you made it. Well done. Well done, my son. Well done, my daughter." Baruch Hashem, that we could hear those words from his mouth. Chapter 3 of Philippians. In verse 1. "Finally, my brothers and sisters, rejoice in the Lord. For me to write the same things to you is not tedious, but for you it is safe." He's continuing encouraging them again. Do you think that the apostle always wrote bright and shiny words to people, to the churches? What did he have to do sometimes? Okay, he had to discipline. He had to, what? Rebuke, correct. Reprimand. It's so inconvenient, isn't it? But again, as a parent, you have to do these things, yes? Or not. And so Messiah, of course, is the perfect example, and the apostle was following his example. Don't have any record necessarily that the apostle had any children. In the natural, you could say maybe he did, maybe he didn't. But you see him, this fatherly care that he speaks of. Particularly, I can think of Timothy as his beloved son, and he speaks of him in very much glowing terms of that a father would speak of a child. as being something that warms his heart. He even spoke of the Philippians as those that were near and dear to his heart. Do you think that he loved the Philippians more than, say, the Galatians? What's that? No, that's right, Noah. He loved all of them. Now, when someone is struggling, how do you deal with that? Say, oh, you're perfect and fine, just the way you are. Here's a trophy. Thanks for trying. Or what do you do in order to motivate someone who's struggling?
You encourage them.
Yes?
Like you're honest with them.
Mm-hmm.
Honesty with love and tell them that they're falling or they're failing. Would you encourage them that with God's help they can succeed?
Amen. Amen. What else? What else do you treat a person or someone who is struggling, a child or a beloved one?
Find ways to motivate them.
Yep.
Tell them we still care.
Yep. Tell them they still care. What is the most common lie that we believe whenever we fail?
Oh, that it's done.
Yeah, it's done. What else? Speak of thinking of ourselves and God. I've sinned. There's no forgiveness for whatever that is. God doesn't love me now. No, he loves you even more. And he's coming after you to bring you back to himself. This is the love of our God. He's not a God that says, oh, you failed again. Oh, good, I get to punish you. No, he is a loving God who utilizes various ways to draw us closer to himself. Sometimes it's through the fires of tribulation in order to melt the resin that has encased our hearts. And other times it's through a warm embrace, maybe perhaps through a brother or a sister or a spouse or someone who loves God, who is able to encourage us and guide us along. But this is our God who is merciful and compassionate. Where do we finish? All right, it's continuing. We're going to jump over to verse 8. It says, "Yet indeed I count all things lost for the excellence of the knowledge of Messiah Yeshua, my Lord, for whom I have suffered the loss of all things, and count them as rubbish, that I may gain Messiah, and be found in him, not having my own righteousness, which is from the law, but that which is through faith in Messiah, the righteousness that is from God by faith." It counts all things as lost, as worthless, rubbish. What does that mean? What was the apostle saying?
Even the things that I think are most important, that are not God, have no value.
Okay. All the things that I think that are important, that have no root in God or of no value. What else?
I think he was saying everything that I can do is rubbish. It's his mercy.
Yeah. Yep. When the apostle came to faith, very roughly, didn't he? Did he have an easy coming into the kingdom?
No,
What did God have to do to get his attention?
throw him off a horse,
And
blind him.
how disorienting would that be?
Amazing.
The shock of being knocked off the horse is probably, enough to get your attention. Being blind, and then hearing God speak to you. And what did God say to the brother Hananiah? There was a particular phrase that really speaks to me. What did he say? Can you think of it when God's speaking to him? He says something to the effect of that he will know how much he has to suffer for me. The apostle probably was of some measure of wealth. He certainly had influence. He wasn't a no-name. He had the ability to go and walk places, and he had authority that had been given to him. And suddenly, he was didn't have a whole lot of cash in his back pocket or pouch, or however that they carried money. He suddenly didn't have a whole lot of people that were listening to him. He didn't have any badge of authority to show off, to get response. He only had what? What did the apostle take with him everywhere he went? Within him.
His faith.
His faith. His growing faith that was nurtured by the waters through the experiences of the past, his knowledge of the scriptures, but also the trials that he endured. He probably had some aspiration of getting old and living comfortably. And suddenly, he was propelled in an entirely new direction, was he not? He took with him a zeal everywhere, right? I mean, can we see that in his writings? The zeal in which he began to persecute the body of Messiah, he took that zeal with him, and God transformed it, and he utilizes that zeal to do something else. Instead of persecuting the believers, he became what?
Believer himself.
Became a believer. And someone who would speak into the lives of millions of people over the centuries. Now, you and I may not have that wide-ranging impact, but if one soul is brought into the kingdom, then we have fulfilled a portion of our calling. What is our primary calling? Change everybody else?
Change yourselves.
Change this heart. Make this temple a worthy place for the Spirit of God to dwell within. And then maybe, Baruch Hashem, we touch someone else's life with the testimony of faith. Not, you need to be like me and do things this way. No, God is God, and He's got it down. We walk this path ourselves, and our lives, the water of our lives filters out into other people's lives. And we speak life into people, and we can't help it. We don't even know it. A river doesn't know that it is a river. It flows because it is what it is. God within us flows out of us, and life begins to touch other people. But I don't do anything special. Well, if you're following Him and seeking Him, He's using you to touch the hearts of the hungry. He is, again, a God who is in constantly recycling. Becoming a new creation in Messiah means to live under the reign of God. When Messiah said the reign or the rule of God, the kingdom of God is within you, what was he saying? We have like castles inside of us? What is the kingdom of God within us? What's that?
The very nature.
Okay, the very nature. What is a kingdom or a reign?
That's where the king lives.
Yeah.
It's his authority, the realm of his authority.
Okay, the realm of his authority. In a kingdom, you have, well, we'll just say two kinds of people. You have people that are law-abiding citizens who live according to the law of the land, and you've got those that don't. And so the apostle later on in, I think, Philippians, says, I see this war, maybe it's Ephesians, I don't remember. There's this war within me of my members. Can you imagine a war within you? Not that it happens to us, of course, but a war within you and me. What is that war?
Paul said, I do what I don't want to do, and I don't do what I want to do. Constantly.
Yeah. Can you imagine your arm just suddenly tweaking up and punching yourself in the head? And yet we do that. When we speak evil of people, when we do or think things that are unkind, or we take a knife and stab it in our arm. I see my members warring with one another. This is the war that we are in. And it is about, slowly but surely, allowing the rule of God to change us. What could that look like? How could his rule be different in us?
Jesus said, if I be lifted up, I will draw all men to me. So if I lift Jesus up in my life, in my heart, people will be drawn to him without my saying a word.
Okay. What else?
You can have unification,
Okay. Unification?
love,
Okay. Bringing people together, being a person of peace. What else? What could that look like?
you can have hope,
And we can bring hope. How many times does God bring somebody into our path, but we see them as an inconvenience? But God really brought them there. And they're there for us to be able to either do kind things for them or for them to speak something into us. Sometimes God puts a person in your path and they speak unkindly to you. How is that God? To reveal, yeah. Yeah. I remember somebody in my past that they were there and they were evil. And they were there for me to be able to see my own brokenness. So that at some point, I would be able to cry out for their healing, for God to have mercy on them. But I had to see my own brokenness first. And so I began to pray for them and forgive them because they only revealed in me what was there. But that I would be an agent, an instrument of God's peace for them. It says that if we cry out against evil people but do not pray for them, we do not know God. He's calling to you and to me to be people that are reaching past our humanity for something supernatural.
When we pray for and forgive people, we're actually having a great spiritual benefit to our own soul because it brings healing of the passion that we once gave into and would not have prayed for them, we would not have forgiven them. But when we find ourselves praying, God brings a healing to our soul of those wounded areas.
Amen. Today salvation has come to this house. Messiah said, do you remember who he said that to? Zacchaeus. What was Zacchaeus? He was a Jew who was a tax collector, who was a traitor. But Zacchaeus was so hungry for God that he did whatever it took to find and to come into communion with God. What was the most sweetest words of Messiah that probably could have been said to him? Come down. Today, I'm coming to your house. And it was with anticipation that Zacchaeus brought him into his house. And of course, there's a spiritual metaphor, is he received Messiah, not in a physical house as much as it was in his house, his heart. Zacchaeus, he said, after he'd stolen so much, what did he say? Did he say, yeah, but the Romans made me do it? Right? Did he say, yeah, but those people deserved it because, what did he do? He said of himself, I give half of my possessions to the poor. And if I have wronged anyone, what does he do? I give it back to them? 4 times what I took from them. I think the scripture says, was it twice? Double the amount? He goes above and beyond because he no longer has the world laying hold of his heart. Money became not as important anymore. Stuff. Honor of people, of which, did you think he had honor of people? Did you think people looked at him and said, man, I want to be like Zacchaeus? He's a good man. Generous and honest. And no, they hated him. And why did they hate him?
Because he took sides with the Romans for his own benefit.
Yep. His stuff came at a price. There were those that loved him, of course, the ones that would, benefit from his wealth, but they secretly hated him too. He cast it all off. He said, "No more. I'm done with that life." Do you know that tradition says that he was a disciple of the Apostle Peter? And he later was made the first overseer of Caesarea. He went from a tax collector, wealthy, despised, into a position of service and of lowliness, serving the people of God in that city. It is a great riches to rags to riches story, so to speak, because all this stuff is meaningless and purposelessness. Only what we build in eternity has any true value. So I encourage you to ask yourself, how am I different today than I was a year ago? Look and be honest. And if you can say, yeah, I made some progress here, Baruch Hashem, keep pressing forward in that. Don't be satisfied with mediocrity. He is a God of excellence, and he is calling each of us to this true perfection. We're not there yet, but by his grace we can. Amen? May he grant us this and this so much more in this coming year. But we implore you and thank you for your great mercy upon us, that you've given us breath and life and brought us to this very moment in time. Father, help us to be those of a sober mind, clear-headed, seeking to be pure-hearted, to stand before you. We thank you for the great gift of forgiveness. May we be also agents of forgiveness to others, so that you may forgive us freely. We thank you for this time. We consecrate it to you, and we ask that you would be glorified in all things. We thank you for this. Amen.